LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESTS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Orbital direction takes flight to 7 for the International Space Station. Into flight. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower and is currently headed to space. In about 15 seconds here, we're coming up on max Q. This is where the vehicle will experience the highest amount of aerodynamic pressures. And there was the call out for max Q. We actually throttled down the Merlin engines in preparation for that event. Coming up are 5 more events in rapid succession. Main engine cutoff, stage separation, first stage flip, second engine start 1, and then the boost back burn on this first stage will begin. Main engine cutoff, also known as MECO, is where all 9 M1D engines on the Falcon 9 first stage will shut down. This is followed by stage separation, or the separation of the first and second stages. From there, the first stage will flip to prepare for re-entry and landing a few minutes later. And the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite to boost Dragon to low Earth orbit, and that's also known as SES-1. The first stage will then begin its boost back burn. That is the first of 3 burns needed to land on our drone ship today. The first of those 5 events, main engine cutoff, is coming up in about 10 seconds.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
IMVAC ignition.
Stage 1 boost back burn startup. Stage 1 boost back.
And that was the call out for the successful completion of our first of 3 burns on the first stage. So if you're just joining us, you're watching a live webcast of the 23rd Commercial Resupply mission to the International Space Station for NASA. This is SpaceX's 21st mission this year, and this is the cargo configuration of our Dragon spacecraft.
Acquisition of signal at Bermuda.
You might be interested to know, in order to get into space, the rocket has to do more than just go up. It actually has to go sideways really, really fast. At liftoff, gravity is pulling straight down the rocket, and as we ascend, we tilt the engines. That turns the rockets horizontally. Now, we're still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad in what we call a gravity turn. The rocket typically needs to go about 7.5 kilometers per second or 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and get into orbit. On screen again is the view of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. On the opposite end of that engine is our Dragon. Seems like we've lost the video footage of the first stage. Hopefully we can get it back in order to see that re-entry burn. But on the bottom left-hand side of the screen is a speedometer of sorts tracking the velocity of the first stage. As we begin that second burn, watch for that speed to slow down, and definitely once we hit the denser parts of the atmosphere, we'll start to see the speed slow down quite significantly.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
And there is the beginning of the entry burn. 3 Merlin engines have relit and are currently slowing down the first stage.
Stage 1, entry burn shutdown.
Awesome. That is the successful completion of the second burn. We are about 60 seconds away from landing, and the vehicle is traveling about 900 miles an hour. This really puts into perspective the deceleration. In the span of less than a minute, we'll have reduced the speed from the speed of a jet all the way down to 0 as the rocket lands. And again, this is our brand new drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. This is going to be the first time that we are making a landing attempt on it, and it's currently perched out in the Atlantic Ocean waiting for that first stage booster to return to it.
Stage 1, landing burn startup.
Engine, center engine number 9 is relit.
Stage 1, landing flag deployed. Stage 1, landing confirmed.
And that is the 90th successful landing for an orbital class rocket, and the very first for our new drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. That is a beautiful thing to see and a great way to start off today's mission. Next event coming up is for the second stage. The Merlin vacuum engine will shut off its engine in an event called Second Engine Cutoff, also known as CECO. And shortly after CECO, we'll be entering a KOS phase and waiting for that confirmation of a good orbit.
CECO.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And we did get confirmation of both CECO, second engine cutoff, and a nominal orbital insertion. Now, the second stage has one last major task, and that is commanding separation of Dragon a couple of minutes from now. Again, this is the second flight for this particular Dragon and the first reuse of our upgraded cargo vehicle. We should have video of Dragon separation from the top of the second stage. It'll give us a nice view into Dragon's unpressurized cargo trunk. And when this Dragon makes its way to the International Space Station, it will be joining the Crew 2 vehicle Endeavour, currently on orbit and attached to the International Space Station. It's going to be super cool to see 2 Dragons docked to the International Space Station once again. And again, for cargo, we will be delivering over 4,800 pounds of science, research, crew supplies, and vehicle hardware to the orbiting laboratory and its crew. We can talk a little bit about the upgrades that have been made to Dragon. The first is solar arrays. Typically after separation, we wait for solar arrays to unfurl from Dragon. This upgraded Dragon has been redesigned, and the solar arrays has its panels built into the trunk section itself, providing power during flight and while on board the station. Another upgrade is how we dock. Before, we needed Dragon to be berth, which is where a robotic arm from the International Space Station reaches out and grabs Dragon and will attach it to the International Space Station. Now, Dragon can autonomously dock using a centerline camera and LiDAR, which is an acronym for Light Detection and Ranging. And so and that is a great view of Dragon separating from the top of the second stage. Now the service section Dracos will undergo some checkouts. Coming up is the beginning of the nose cone opening sequence. I'm going to hand it over to Shaniqua in Houston to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Andy. Everything is still going well back here in Houston and Mission Control Houston. Right after Dragon separated, it began a series of automatic checkouts, including some small firings of the Draco maneuvering thrusters. The next milestone is the nose cone deploy. And if you're just joining us, we're in Mission Control Houston currently, and we're waiting for the confirmation of nose cone deploy for Cargo Dragon. And as we still wait, we do have a special guest. Now joining me on the phone is manager of the International Space Station Systems Engineering and Integration Office, Jeff Aaron. Jeff, can you outline the major activities for the crew with CRS-23 for us?
Sure can. In a word, they're going to be extremely busy conducting research. There's more than a metric ton of research arriving with SpaceX 23, much of which needs to be removed in hours to days to start the science and research mission, because most of which will be completed in the entire 30-day mission while SpaceX is on orbit. And then much of that science needs to return with the vehicle upon its departure. So in addition to the research mission, the crew will be conducting 3 EVAs over a 10-day period of time, 2 EVAs on the Russian segment where 2 new power cables will be installed to enable additional power transfer to the new module, the module that just arrived actually a month ago today, the multi-purpose laboratory module, and 1 EVA on the U.S. segment to install the 3rd IROSA mod kit, which will enable a future solar array upgrade on the U.S. segment.
Thanks, Jeff. And I know you mentioned a lot about the science and the hardware that's going up. All right. And thanks so much for joining us today. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, flight controllers are monitoring the systems on the station itself ahead of Dragon's arrival Monday morning. Once Dragon crosses that approach ellipsoid, which is the mythical sphere around the station, flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston will begin joint operations with the SpaceX teams in Hawthorne, California. NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur will be monitoring the approach and arrival of Dragon with a planned docking Monday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern. Once Cargo Dragon is docked to the station, MacArthur and Kimbrough will begin those hatch operations that Jeff mentioned. And between the International Space Station and Cargo Dragon, the hatches will be opened. Again, everything's still on track on the International Space Station side. So that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston. Now back over to Kennedy. Megan?
Thanks, Shaniqua. That's going to wrap up our launch coverage of SpaceX's 23rd Commercial Resupply Services mission. Cargo Dragon is on course to dock to the International Space Station at about 11 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We will have live coverage of rendezvous and docking beginning at 9:30. In the meantime, you can learn even more about this mission on nasa.gov Commercial Resupply. Thank you for joining us, and we'll leave you with a replay of today's gorgeous launch.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7,